The Gilded Age wasn't merely an era, it was an American economic supernova, a blinding explosion of wealth creation that produced fortunes of such magnitude they rewrote the rules of society itself. Indeed, their children married European aristocracy. Their donations built universities and museums that stand today. Their business decisions determined whether entire cities would prosper or wither. Yet for every dynasty that survived, a dozen spectacular fortunes evaporated like morning mist, victims of inheritance taxes, financial incompetence, and family dysfunction that proved more powerful than seemingly invincible wealth. These forgotten financial titans once possessed resources that would humble today's billionaires, yet their descendants now live in complete anonymity, the family name erased from the roster of influence. Today, we share the untold counterpoint to America's success mythology, how fortunes built over decades through ruthless business acumen could dissolve within less than 3 generations, leaving nothing but architectural ghosts and cautionary whispers. Picture yourself standing before an architectural marvel on New York's Riverside Drive, where a palace worthy of European royalty once commanded the Manhattan skyline. This was no ordinary mansion, but rather a testament to one man's audacious dream, a 75-room Renaissance chateau that cost an astronomical $7 million in 1906, equivalent to over $200 million today. And this architectural triumph, with its gold-leafed ceilings, private art gallery, and 3-story pipe organ, stood as a monument to America's first age of excess. This was Riverside, the home of Charles M. Schwab, a man whose rise from mill worker to steel titan embodied the American dream. In the glittering realm of America's Gilded Age, where titans like Carnegie and Morgan reigned supreme, Schwab carved his own empire with theatrical flair. As the first president of U.S. Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation, he commanded an annual salary of $100,000 and a bonus of $1 million. Yet beneath the shimmer of success lay a tale of dramatic decline. He spent money like water, hosting lavish parties with champagne flowing, maintaining a fleet of yachts, and building palatial residences that could rival European aristocrats. His appetite for opulence stretched from his summer estate in Loretto, Pennsylvania, to grand philanthropic gestures that seemed more theatrical productions than charity. In today's episode, we'll explore the remarkable rise and tragic fall of Charles M. Schwab, from Pennsylvania's steel mills to a legacy lost, as the excesses of a gilded life faded into mere memories. He seemingly had it all, a fortune that would make today's billionaires raise their perfectly manicured eyebrows. Indeed, at his family's peak, Charles M. Schwab sat atop a staggering $40 billion empire in modern money, a sum that plants him firmly among America's Gilded Age titans. But it's how he flaunted it that would truly capture the attention. For example, his piece de resistance was the absolutely magnificent Riverside Mansion in Manhattan. A $200 million, in today's currency, icon of excess, this architectural marvel commandeers an entire city block on Riverside Drive. We're talking 75 rooms of pure French chateau opulence, complete with a Gothic chapel that would make Notre Dame blush and marble staircases that practically demand a grand entrance. The Palm Court accommodated 300 of society's finest, and the original Rodins graced the corridors like common decorations, while priceless European masterpieces adorn walls as casually as family photos. Furthermore, the ballroom, dripping in gold leaf and crystal, served as the stage where America's industrial royalty performs their social dance. But that's merely the city residence. Let's hop over to Immergrün, his summer sanctuary in Loretto, Pennsylvania. This 44-room countryside palace sprawled across 400 acres of what can only be described as botanical perfection. Indoor swimming pool, naturally, private theatre, but of course, bowling alley. Would you expect anything less? The man maintained a collection of properties that would make a real estate mogul weep. Hunting lodges in New Jersey, coastal retreats, urban investments that read like a Monopoly champion's portfolio. His yacht, Loretto, demanded $300,000 annually just for upkeep. That's the price of some people's homes, mind you. Yet beneath this cathedral of consumption lied a surprisingly generous heart. Loretto transformed under his patronage. Schools rose, churches appeared, infrastructure materialized. His charitable gifts matched his personal indulgences, dollar for dollar, funding everything from public libraries to technical schools, particularly in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Thus, it is heartbreaking to see the downfall of such an iconic man, who also happened to grow up with humble immigrant roots, as we'll see in the next chapter. In the shadow of Pennsylvania's Allegheny Mountains, where coal dust and Catholic crosses dotted the landscape in equal measure, the American story of Charles M. Schwab began not with grandeur, but with the quiet determination of German immigrants. His father, John Anthony Schwab, had crossed an ocean carrying little more than hope and calloused hands. The elder Schwab would marry Pauline Farabor, herself born to German-American stock, their union blessed in 1862 with a son who would one day command industrial empires. The family's move to Loretto, Pennsylvania, proved pivotal. It was a town where faith and commerce intertwined, where St. Francis College's spires pierced the mountain mist, and where John Anthony's modest wool and cotton business provided just enough, but only just enough. The young Charles, or Charlie, as townsfolk called him, absorbed lessons that no business school could teach. The weight of a dollar, the value of a handshake, the unwritten code of mountain communities where a man's word carried more currency than the contents of his wallet. In Loretto's Catholic schools, young Charlie's extraordinary gifts began to surface. His memory, described by teachers as near photographic, allowed him to recite entire passages of text after a single reading. But it was his peculiar alchemy of charm and capability that set him apart. Whether calculating complex sums in his head or organizing school events, Charlie Schwab possessed that rare ability to make everyone in his orbit feel like the most important person in the room. At 12, while other boys played at games, Charlie drove stakes for surveying teams, earning $1.50 daily, real money in mountain country. Later, behind the counter of Loretto's grocery store, he displayed an almost theatrical talent for commerce. Customers would watch, mesmerized, as he totaled complex orders in his head, all while engaging in the kind of warm banter that made them forget they were conducting business at all. His mother, Pauline, recognizing something extraordinary in her son, nurtured his gift for music alongside his mathematical prowess. Young Charlie's fingers, equally adept at piano keys and profit calculations, suggested a versatility that would later serve him well in both boardrooms and ballrooms. These seemingly disparate talents, artistic sensitivity and mathematical precision, would eventually combine to create something unprecedented in American industry. A businessman who could both master the minutiae of steel production and inspire thousands with the force of his personality. Yet as young Charlie stood on the cusp of manhood, destiny was preparing an encounter that would transform this promising mountain boy into an industrial legend. In the smoky streets of Pittsburgh, Andrew Carnegie, the nation's foremost steel baron, was about to meet a young man whose extraordinary combination of charm, ability, and ambition would reshape not just one industry, but the very nature of American business itself. In the smoke-filled world of Pittsburgh's steel mills, Charles Schwab's trajectory defied the established order of things. The young man who had once driven stakes in Loretto's mountain soil found himself driving ambition into the very heart of American industry. Carnegie Steel, that great crucible of industrial might, became his proving ground, and Andrew Carnegie himself, the diminutive Scotsman who controlled America's steel destiny, became his mentor. The transformation from manual laborer to engineering assistant took just 6 months, a promotion so swift it left whispers in its wake. But those who worked alongside young Schwab understood. Here was a man who could calculate complex metallurgical formulas in his head while simultaneously charming hardened mill workers and Eastern financiers alike. Carnegie, watching from his fortress-like offices, recognized something of himself in this young man who seemed to master every challenge with almost theatrical ease. By age 24, Schwab commanded Carnegie's Homestead Works, the crown jewel of the steel empire. Workers twice his age took orders from this wunderkind, who remembered not just their names, but their children's birthdays. At 35, he ascended to the presidency of Carnegie Steel, the youngest man ever to reach such heights. His methods differed dramatically from the iron-fisted approach of his contemporaries. Where others ruled through fear, Schwab led through an almost magnetic personal force, pioneering profit-sharing programs that transformed workers into stakeholders. The creation of U.S. Steel in 1901 revealed Schwab's true genius. In smoke-filled rooms where industrial titans plotted the future of American manufacturing, Schwab orchestrated a merger of unprecedented scale. The numbers were staggering. $492 million, America's first billion-dollar corporation. His personal stake, $28 million in stock, represented more wealth than most men could imagine. But for Schwab, this was merely a prelude. The acquisition of Bethlehem Steel in 1904 marked his masterpiece. The struggling company, under Schwab's guidance, became a laboratory for industrial innovation. His gamble on the Bethlehem H-beam, a revolutionary design that would literally reshape America's skylines, demonstrated both technological vision and commercial courage. Every major construction project of the era, from the George Washington Bridge's massive spans to the Chrysler Building's gleaming spire, bore the stamp of Bethlehem Steel. During World War I, when America's industrial might became crucial to Allied victory, Schwab's organizational genius reached its apex. President Wilson himself called upon him to accelerate shipbuilding efforts. The results were spectacular. American shipyards, under Schwab's direction, produced vessels at rates that seemed to defy physical possibility. His empire expanded beyond steel into mining, manufacturing, and real estate. Financial titans like J.P. Morgan counted him as an equal. Political leaders sought his counsel. He moved through the highest circles of global power with the same ease he had once shown in Loretto's grocery store. Yet at the very peak of his success, as Bethlehem Steel's furnaces roared and his personal fortune seemed limitless, destiny was preparing a cruel reversal. In the glittering New York of the 1920s, while jazz bands played and champagne flowed, the first tremors of Charles Schwab's downfall were already rumbling beneath the surface of his seemingly impregnable empire. The market speculation that had once seemed to turn everything he touched to gold began to betray him, each loss driving him to chase ever riskier ventures. Even before Black Tuesday cast its shadow across America, the man who had risen from the Pennsylvania mountains was discovering that financial gravity spares no one, not even industrial titans. The Great Depression struck with the force of a blast furnace explosion. Bethlehem Steel's stock certificates, once worth $200 per share and proudly displayed in oak-paneled boardrooms, now traded for less than the price of a workman's lunch. The numbers told a story of almost mythological destruction, billions in value vanishing like morning mist, personal guarantees on company loans becoming millstones around their guarantor's neck. Each day's financial pages wrote another chapter in the dismantling of a legend. The Riverside Mansion, that monument to Gilded Age excess that had hosted princes and presidents, stood as a silent witness to its owner's reversal of fortune. Unable to meet even basic property taxes, Schwab watched as his greatest symbol of success slipped through his fingers. The estate's foreclosure proceedings drew crowds of onlookers, some perhaps remembering nights when they had danced beneath its crystal chandeliers. His beloved yacht, once the toast of Monte Carlo, was sold for a fraction of its worth. The art collection that had made critics swoon was dispersed to satisfy creditors. The transformation was brutal in its totality. The man who had once calculated complex steel production figures in his head now struggled to balance his checkbook. From his new home, a modest apartment that would once have housed one of his middle managers, he borrowed money from increasingly reluctant friends. His famous smile, once capable of charming millions from the most hardened bankers, grew strained, then rare, then vanished altogether. Health failed as fortune fled. The robust figure who had strode through mill yards, memorizing workers' names and personal stories, became stooped, hesitant. His legendary optimism, which had helped build skyscrapers and launch ships, finally buckled under the accumulated weight of disaster. Even Bethlehem Steel, the company he had transformed from a struggling operation into an industrial colossus, slipped from his grasp, though its furnaces continued to burn. When death came in 1939, it found Charles Schwab in circumstances that would have seemed impossible during his glory days. The final accounting showed debts of $340,000, a number that would have seemed like pocket change to the man who had once commanded the equivalent of billions. The obituaries struggled to reconcile the industrial genius who had shaped America's skyline with the broken figure who had died practically penniless. But perhaps the most profound irony lay in what remained of the Schwab legacy. Here was a man who had revolutionized building construction, whose steel had made possible the very shape of modern America. Yet he died without enough money to pay for his own funeral. The decline was so complete that even the mountains of Loretto, where his extraordinary journey had begun, seemed to cast longer shadows over his memory. Yet as the 1940s dawned and America stood on the brink of another great transformation, questions remained about the true nature of Charles Schwab's legacy. In the spring of 1946, as America emerged triumphant from World War II, Emma Urania Dinky Schwab died in relative obscurity, closing the final chapter of the Schwab dynasty. She had outlived her husband by 7 years, inhabiting a world that had forgotten the days when the Schwab name opened every door in New York. Their marriage, childless through the decades, left no direct heir to carry forward either the family name or its legacy. The final accounting of the Schwab estate stood as stark testimony to the completeness of the dynasty's collapse. Creditors picked through the remaining assets like scavengers after a storm, finding little of value that hadn't already been claimed. Even personal items, once treasured for their memories rather than their worth, went to auction. The man who had built billion-dollar corporations left behind a legacy of debt and disappointment. Bethlehem Steel survived its founder's passing, but never recaptured its former glory. Through the latter half of the 20th century, the company that had once revolutionized American construction gradually faded, finally surrendering to bankruptcy in 2001. The furnaces that had forged the steel for America's greatest buildings fell silent in 2003, marking the end of an industrial era that Schwab himself had helped create. In Loretto, where the Schwab story began, preservation of his memory fell to historical societies rather than descendants. The grounds of Immergrün, once manicured to rival European palaces, slowly surrendered to nature's advance. Modern-day members of the extended Schwab family live unremarkable lives, their connection to the steel titan existing primarily in genealogical records and family stories. Yet Schwab's influence persists in unexpected ways. The educational institutions he supported continue their missions, perhaps his most sustainable legacy. Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, transformed its industrial ruins into symbols of renewal, proving that even in decline, Schwab's vision could inspire innovation. The steel-framed skyscrapers he helped make possible still pierce the clouds above American cities, silent monuments to his technical genius. Time has rendered a complex verdict on Charles Schwab's legacy. Modern observers see in his story cautionary lessons about hubris and the ephemeral nature of wealth. His management innovations, the emphasis on worker welfare and the belief in positive reinforcement, have become standard practice in modern industry. The very volatility of his fortune offers warnings to contemporary titans of industry who might believe their own success unassailable. In the end, the most profound aspect of Schwab's legacy may lie not in what he built or lost, but in what his story reveals about the American experience itself. Here was a man who embodied both the promise and peril of the American dream, the rapid rise from poverty to unimaginable wealth, the innovative spirit that transformed an industry, and the hubris that eventually brought it all crashing down. The steel that bore his company's name still stands in bridges and buildings across America, even as the fortune that built them vanished like morning fog. Perhaps that is Charles Schwab's true legacy. Not the millions made and lost, but the physical transformation of America itself. A transformation that, for better or worse, helped shape the nation we inhabit today. Believe it or not, those nickels you toss into cup holders and forget about once built the tallest skyscraper on Earth. Frank Woolworth understood something about American consumption that no Harvard business graduate could grasp. That ordinary people yearned to touch merchandise before buying, to browse without judgment, to participate in retail therapy regardless of their social status. In due time, each humble coin multiplied by millions of customers across hundreds of stores eventually generated enough wealth to build mansions that would later host Taylor Swift music videos. Indeed, the Woolworth family fortune climbed high enough to construct the world's tallest skyscraper, paid for entirely in cash, and acquire opulent mansions that rivaled the estates of industrial barons. Yet within decades of Frank's death, his descendants transformed astute business wealth into reckless family excess, hosting million-dollar Depression-era parties and viewing their five-and-dime heritage with embarrassment. The final act unfolded with bitter family feuds over dwindling assets, the selling of Frank's beloved skyscraper, and the ultimate bankruptcy of an empire built penny by penny. Therefore, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we trace the spectacular billion-dollar rise and devastating fall of the Woolworth family, America's most dramatic retail dynasty.
The latest, greatest, ever more spectacular Woolworth Christmas Show. EMI, Super Chrome, tapes that come in threes. Telltale, tape and book, helps a child to read.
While some billionaires these days build rockets to escape Earth's troubles, Frank Woolworth built something far more impressive for his era, an entire retail universe where ordinary Americans could afford a taste of the good life. When death finally halted Frank's remarkable climb in 1919, his personal fortune stood at a jaw-dropping $76.5 million, equivalent to 1/1214th of the entire United States gross national product. Translated into today's currency, that sum would amount to over $1 billion, and some financial historians argue the Woolworth wealth reached even greater heights. So enormous was the Woolworth wealth that when Frank decided to construct the world's tallest building in New York City, he simply paid for the entire $13.5 million project in cash. The family's most notable residence was Winfield Hall, Frank's Long Island mansion that cost $10 million to build, a sum so astronomical for the early 20th century that it represented the equivalent of a billionaire's vanity project today. The estate was so magnificent that it later served as the filming location for Taylor Swift's 2014 music video, Blank Space, a fitting postscript for a property built on the dreams of millions of middle-class shoppers. While Frank himself was reportedly careful with money despite his immense wealth, later generations, particularly Barbara Hutton, became legendary for their extravagant spending habits. Barbara's 18th birthday party in 1930, thrown imprudently during the depths of the Great Depression, cost approximately $1 million in inflation-adjusted currency, creating substantial public backlash at such tone-deaf display during national suffering. Her subsequent lifestyle became a tabloid mainstay, featuring 7 marriages and divorces, including to Hollywood star Cary Grant, with each divorce settlement draining millions from the family coffers.
She had such an unhappy beginning. The fact that her mother committed suicide, the fact that her father didn't care for her.
Known for showering friends, family members, and even complete strangers with outrageously expensive gifts, Barbara maintained homes in multiple countries, accumulated extensive jewelry collections, and entertained on a scale that would make European royalty envious. This combination of retail genius and generational excess illustrates the classic American wealth narrative, the brilliant entrepreneur who builds an empire through innovation and determination, followed by heirs who lack both the founder's business acumen and financial restraint. Indeed, behind every great fortune lies a story of origin, and the Woolworth billions began not with diamonds and mansions, but with the calloused hands of farmers who could never have imagined their bloodline would transform American commerce forever. The Woolworth family saga began not in the gleaming aisles of retail stores, but in the rich soil of England, where their surname derived from the Old English place name Walworth, meaning enclosure of the Britons, or Welshman's farm. By the 11th century, the Woolworths had established themselves as landowners in Surrey, England, with records indicating their involvement in local governance during the Norman era. The transatlantic journey of the Woolworth lineage commenced around 1665, when English farmers bearing the name migrated to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Richard Woolworth, a weaver from St. Albans, arrived in Newburyport, Massachusetts in 1678, marking the first documented appearance of the surname in colonial records. This enterprising ancestor married Hannah Huggins, daughter of a prominent Suffield, Connecticut family, and acquired land grants along the Connecticut River Valley, establishing the Woolworths as yeoman farmers in the developing colonies. Through successive generations, the family expanded their agricultural holdings, with later descendants growing tobacco and serving in local militia during the American Revolution. Frank's father, John Hubble Woolworth, born in 1821 in Rodman, New York, continued the family's farming tradition. His marriage to Fanny McBriar in 1849 introduced Scots-Irish blood into the lineage, blending English agrarian tradition with Scots-Irish resilience that would later influence Frank's approach to business. Despite their respectable heritage, the Woolworth family's farm in Great Bend yielded only modest returns, placing Frank's childhood fully in the realm of rural economic hardship.
They had been farming for generations, and it was on a small plot of land in the tiny community of Great Bend, New York, that Frank Woolworth was born on April 13, 1852.
Born on April 13, 1852, young Frank balanced farm chores with studies at a one-room schoolhouse where his education emphasized practical arithmetic and penmanship. At 16, Frank left formal education to work full-time on the family farm, but a formative incident would soon ignite his entrepreneurial spirit. In 1868, Frank and his brother Charles saved coins to purchase a 50-cent scarf for their mother, only to face humiliating mockery from store clerks for their small change. An experience that instilled in Frank a desire to create retail spaces where customers could browse without judgment. His entry into the commercial world began modestly in 1873 as a stockboy at Augsbury and Moore Dry Goods in Watertown, New York, where he observed the success of a 5-cent merchandise table, a concept he would later expand into a retail empire. Despite a crushing initial failure when his Utica venture collapsed in 1879, Frank quickly rebounded, opening a store in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, months later that pioneered the fixed-price 5 and dime model. This innovative approach merged his English ancestors' mercantile traditions with Scots-Irish frugality, creating a retail format that would democratize shopping for generations of Americans.
He worked 14 hours a day, stocking shelves, waiting on customers, and creating fancy displays, which he proved to have quite a flair for.
At 21, Frank Woolworth's retail education began in earnest when he secured a position at a dry goods shop in Watertown, New York, earning a modest $3.50 per week. The conventional shopping experience of the era forced customers to request every item from clerks stationed behind counters, a tedious process that created unnecessary barriers between shoppers and merchandise. Despite the monotony, Frank was captivated by the lively atmosphere, the satisfying clink of coins, women haggling over ribbons, and the colorful spools of thread arranged meticulously on shelves. His keen observation revealed a fundamental truth. Customers resented their dependence on clerks for every trivial purchase and yearned for the freedom to browse independently. While vacationing in Pennsylvania in 1878, Frank encountered a small store that displayed inexpensive items on open tables for customers to examine without employee interference, a concept that sent his entrepreneurial imagination racing. Frank's genius was not in copying this idea, but in refining it with a crucial innovation, establishing two clear 5 cents and 10 cents. His first venture, the Great 5-Cent Store in Utica, New York, launched in 1879 with high hopes but crashed spectacularly after just 6 weeks. Undeterred by this initial failure, Frank secured additional financing and tried again in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where his second attempt would alter American retail forever. The Lancaster store opened on June 21, 1879, with a paltry inventory worth just $31, consisting of humble items arranged on open tables.
Tucked away in the corner of the old F.W. Woolworth 5 and dime sits the 74-foot lunch counter, dishing up American classics, much like it did in the 1950s.
We're a burger shaking from...
Bold signs proclaimed, any item 5 cents or 10 cents, no exceptions, a straightforward message that eliminated the uncertainty and intimidation that characterized traditional shopping experiences. By noon on opening day, the store was packed with customers, particularly farmers' wives who delighted in examining merchandise without scrutiny. Frank's modest inventory sold out within days, and by month's end, he had earned $127, enough capital to finance a second location. Word of the novel shopping concept spread rapidly, and by 1900, the Woolworth Company operated 59 stores across the northeastern United States. Just 11 years later, Frank presided over more than 600 locations throughout the United States, Canada, and Great Britain. The true brilliance of Frank's business model lay not merely in low prices, but in his relentless cost-cutting measures. Direct purchasing from manufacturers eliminated middlemen, hiring young, inexperienced salesgirls kept wages minimal, and strategic use of mirrors in small stores created an illusion of spaciousness. Customers felt a sense of wealth and abundance as they browsed aisles of affordable luxuries, a psychological effect that Frank understood all too well. His retail philosophy democratized consumption, allowing even the poorest Americans to participate in the emerging consumer culture that would define 20th century America. By 1900, Frank had transformed from a humiliated farm boy buying his mother a scarf to a retail visionary with enough wealth and ambition to contemplate his next audacious project. Having conquered American retail, Frank Woolworth sought a more permanent monument to his success, a structure so magnificent it would immortalize his name in the New York skyline and stand as testimony to the power of nickels and dimes accumulated by the millions. By 1910, his vision materialized in the form of a 792-foot colossus in Manhattan, the Woolworth Building, an architectural marvel that transformed a humble retail concept into a towering symbol of American capitalism. He commissioned architect Cass Gilbert to design a structure that would blend commerce with cathedral-like grandeur, resulting in a neo-Gothic masterpiece adorned with pointed arches, menacing gargoyles, and a lobby resplendent with gold leaf paintings. The attention to detail bordered on extravagance. 30 miles of brass trim lined the corridors, rare marble floors gleamed underfoot, and intricate craftsmanship transformed what could have been a mundane office building into a temple of commerce. The cost was astronomical, $13.5 million, yet Frank insisted on paying the entire sum in cash, proudly declining loans and financing options. When advisors cautioned him about the excessive expenditure, Frank dismissed their concerns, declaring the building was not for today, but for tomorrow. The grand opening on April 24, 1913, was a spectacle. When President Woodrow Wilson pressed a button in Washington, D.C., 80,000 electric lights instantly illuminated the exterior, causing gasps from the New York crowds. Newspapers dubbed it the eighth wonder of the world, and for a time it was the tallest building on Earth. Yet behind this triumph, Frank's health was deteriorating. 6 years after his building's opening, on April 8, 1919, Frank collapsed during a board meeting, his final words reportedly urging the expansion of more stores as life slipped away at the age of 66. The man who had transformed dimes into a dynasty left behind a vast fortune of $27 million and a family unprepared to shepherd his legacy. His daughter, Edna, inherited significant wealth but had little interest in retail operations, preferring gardens and libraries to boardrooms. Leadership of the company fell to Frank's cousin Hubert, whose preference for golf over governance began the slow deterioration of the once immaculate stores. Tragedy struck when Edna took her own life, her fortune passing to her daughter Barbara Hutton, a young woman ill-equipped to manage such wealth and destined for a life of notorious excess and personal unhappiness. As Frank Woolworth's body was lowered into the ground, the future of his empire remained uncertain. The patriarch was gone, but his name still blazed in electric lights above the greatest city in America. By 1954, Woolworths celebrated $1 billion in annual sales, yet this peak of financial success masked the looming collapse as third-generation heirs indulged in unprecedented extravagance, purchasing yachts, racehorses, and original Picasso paintings with seemingly inexhaustible funds. At one particularly ostentatious celebration, champagne flowed from a fountain shaped like the Woolworth building itself, a fitting symbol of how the empire's assets were being squandered on fleeting pleasures rather than reinvested in the business. The family's disconnection manifested in dangerous corporate arrogance. When new discount chains like Kmart emerged in the 1960s, Woolworth executives dismissed them with contempt. Similarly, when Sam Walton opened the first Walmart in 1962, a Woolworth vice president scoffed that they were the original discounters and newcomers would never catch up, a catastrophic misjudgment. The 1960s brought sweeping changes to American consumerism. Families migrated to sprawling suburbs, automobiles replaced trolleys, and shoppers increasingly demanded spacious parking lots rather than downtown locations. Shopping malls emerged as the new retail paradigm, while Woolworth remained stubbornly anchored to aging Main Street locations with broken steps and limited parking.
Rubbermaid. So for great low prices at Wilco, just look for these signs.
Internal family conflict further accelerated the decline. By 1968, Woolworth heirs, now feuding over inheritance shares, pushed to liquidate valuable assets, prioritizing short-term cash distribution over long-term business viability. The descendants developed a curious shame about their humble origins, viewing the association with five and dime stores as embarrassingly pedestrian and incongruent with their newly cultivated sophistication. In 1974, they attempted to rebrand stores as Woolco and raised prices to compete with upscale department stores, a strategic blunder that betrayed Frank's vision and alienated their core customer base. Longtime shoppers felt betrayed by the transformation. The beloved button bins and jelly bean jars disappeared, replaced by higher-priced goods that neither impressed affluent consumers nor satisfied budget-conscious shoppers. Sales plummeted while Walmart, faithfully adhering to Frank's original philosophy of low prices and no frills, expanded to 125 locations by 1975, as Woolworth's 1,000 stores faded into increasing obsolescence. By 1991, the company faced financial ruin. Stores closed monthly, debt mounted, and the desperate board of directors targeted Frank's beloved Woolworth building for sale.
Everything that pleases, and you can't get fresher than that. Well, Woolworth's the fresh food people, with fresh ideas for you. Well, Woolworth's the fresh food people, and you can't get fresher than that. Australia's Woolworths, the fresh food people.
The proposed sale split the family into warring factions. Older relatives fought to preserve it, while younger trust fund beneficiaries pushed aggressively for its liquidation. After years of bitter infighting, the building was finally sold in 1998 for $155 million. The new owners converted the upper floors into luxury apartments, while workers removed Frank's bronze bust from the entrance hall and covered the commemorative tiles with wallpaper, physically erasing the building's connection to its creator. The proceeds quickly evaporated, used to settle mounting debts and temporarily prop up failing stores. In 1997, Woolworth Corporation announced the closure of its remaining stores, ending a 118-year retail legacy. On July 17, 1997, the final 400 Woolworth stores closed permanently. At the last New York City location, elderly customers lined up before dawn for commemorative coffee mugs bearing the Woolworth name. The company's remaining assets were redirected toward Foot Locker, its athletic footwear subsidiary. The business, founded on buttons, yarn, and candy counters, would conclude its story selling basketball shoes and sweatbands, an incongruous epilogue to Frank's five and dime vision. Today, the Woolworth legacy survives only in scattered artifacts, faded signs, collectible lunch counter stools, and commemorative mugs treasured by those who remember a time when 5 cents could buy a small measure of joy across a gleaming counter. Southern fortunes speak in different accents than northern wealth. Thus, the Reynolds dynasty rose from Carolina soil through tobacco leaves, crafting an empire where smoke and profit intertwined into billions. Soon, the entire country would bow to their influence, a company fiefdom where R.J. Reynolds commanded a manufacturing kingdom that converted addiction into architectural splendor. Consequently, his children inherited unimaginable privilege in 1918. Trust funds worth hundreds of millions in today's currency, alongside the peculiar isolation of tobacco aristocracy. Yet all their tobacco millions proved useless on that July night in 1932, when gunfire shattered the sleeping porch silence, launching a mystery no Reynolds fortune could ever fully bury. Therefore, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we share the wild saga of America's original addiction aristocrats, the titans of tobacco, as it were, weaving a tale that includes everything from Broadway stars under FBI surveillance to Gen Z descendants making failed TikTok apps, as we describe the Reynolds family tobacco fortune. How the Rockefellers of the South couldn't escape a murder mystery. Before America struck oil or forged steel, it was getting filthy rich on a plant so profitable that colonial Virginia practically printed money by stuffing dried leaves into barrels and shipping them to nicotine-starved Europeans. Tobacco reigned as America's original cash cow, transforming humble farmers into manor lords and financing the mansions, political careers, and champagne lifestyles that would come to define Southern aristocracy. The Reynolds saga began when 21-year-old Abram Reynolds hauled his family to Virginia's rugged Patrick County in 1810, snagging 180 acres of prime tobacco-growing soil and setting the stage for a dynasty that would eventually make the Kardashians look middle class. Abram and wife Polly expanded like modern-day corporate raiders, gobbling up neighboring lands until they controlled nearly 600 acres by 1825, positioned at the base of aptly named No Business Mountain. Their son, Hardin Reynolds, constructed Rock Spring Plantation in 1843, a sprawling 717-acre agricultural complex that dabbled not just in growing tobacco, but processing it, selling it, and banking the obscene profits. The Reynolds' early fortune, like most Southern wealth, had a dark foundation. At its peak in 1863, Rock Spring exploited 88 enslaved individuals whose labor created the capital that would later finance an industrial empire. When Hardin died in 1874, he left behind an $80,000 fortune, a cool $2 million in today's money. But this was pocket change compared to what his fourth son was about to unleash. Richard Joshua R.J. Reynolds sold his inheritance share for $7,500 and bet it all on a tiny tobacco operation in Winston, North Carolina, then just a speck on the map with 443 residents. His unassuming Little Red Factory, established in 1875, initially produced 150,000 pounds of chewing tobacco annually, the embryo of what would become the smoking equivalent of Standard Oil. As his Gilded Age contemporaries chased headlines with skyscrapers and transcontinental railroads, R.J. Reynolds pursued something far more insidious and profitable. An addictive product Americans couldn't quit, with profit margins that would make modern pharmaceutical companies blush. By 1907, Reynolds had revolutionized pipe smoking with Prince Albert tobacco, capturing a staggering 33% of the entire United States pipe market within 5 years through iconic Manhattan billboards proclaiming it the nation's joy smoke. Then came his coup de grace, Camel cigarettes in 1913, the world's first truly mass-produced pre-rolled cigarette with a patented toasting process that hooked Americans by the millions and revolutionized nicotine consumption. The Winston-Salem factory complex swelled to 2 million square feet as Camel cigarettes reached 425 million units sold by 1920. Reynolds' personal fortune bloated to $28 million by his death, over $700 million in today's cash, as he fashioned Winston-Salem into a company town where 60% of residents depended on Reynolds' paychecks. By the time his 4 children inherited their tobacco kingdom between 1906 and 1911, they weren't just wealthy, they were American royalty, born into privilege so extreme that normal rules of society seemed like quaint suggestions rather than actual constraints. R.J. Reynolds died in 1918 with $28 million in his pocket, equal to $700 million today, leaving behind 4 children seemingly designed to prove that enormous inheritance and sound judgment rarely share the same bank account. Richard Joshua Dick Reynolds Jr., the anointed heir apparent, was just 12 years old when Daddy died, yet found himself entrusted with a $100 million trust fund, a staggering $2.5 billion in today's dollars. Dick Jr. celebrated his financial emancipation by creating a personal fiefdom on Georgia's Sapelo Island, 4,000 acres with a uranium enrichment lab disguised as a dairy barn and an airstrip for his fleet of World War II surplus planes. His marital history read like a Hollywood tabloid: 6 marriages, including a Ziegfeld Follies dancer and Swiss heiress Anne-Marie Schmidt, with divorce settlements that included $5 million yearly to first wife Blitz Dillard until her 1961 suicide. While Dick was burning through millions, Sister Mary Reynolds channeled her $47 million inheritance into avant-garde art, collaborating with Marcel Duchamp and secretly financing Salvador Dali's exhibitions via Swiss shell companies. Sister Nancy Susan Reynolds controlled an astonishing $890 million through various trusts, playing both sides of history by donating the family estate to Wake Forest University while simultaneously funding segregationist causes. Nancy's hypocrisy reached its peak when she spent $50 million on lung cancer treatments in 1983. Medical care funded by the very Reynolds tobacco dividends that likely caused her disease. The youngest heir, Zachary Smith Reynolds, received a $20 million trust fund, $460 million modern dollars, that would mature when he reached 28, money he would never live to spend. Smith rebelled against his buttoned-up tobacco dynasty by becoming an aviation enthusiast and marrying Broadway star Libby Holman in 1931, scandalous given she was 31 to his 20 years, Jewish in their Protestant world, and a sexually liberated performer. The North Carolina aristocracy recoiled as Smith installed his Broadway bride at Reynolds House, the family's palatial estate where previous generations of Reynolds women had embodied Southern propriety rather than belting suggestive songs. Their marriage became tabloid fodder, with Smith's sister Nancy Reynolds particularly resentful of Holman's outsider status and the media attention she brought to a family that preferred its wealth quiet and its scandals buried. The couple's fights became legendary, fueled by Prohibition-era bootleg liquor and the incompatibility of a sheltered tobacco heir and a sophisticated Broadway star with rumored bisexual affairs that later attracted FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover's surveillance. What nobody knew was that Libby was pregnant with Smith's child when on July 6, 1932, just days after Smith's 21st birthday party, a gunshot on Reynolds House's sleeping porch would transform the Reynolds dynasty from merely wealthy to genuinely notorious. The timeline of July 5th and 6th, 1932, reads like an Agatha Christie novel, except the victim was a real tobacco heir worth $20 million, and the suspects included a Broadway star, a jealous friend, and a family desperate to avoid scandal. By 9 o'clock that evening, Smith Reynolds' 21st birthday party for friend Charles Gideon Hill Jr. was in full swing, with 200 guests, including local bootleggers supplying bathtub gin, flooding Reynolds House. At 1:15 in the morning, the last regular guests departed, leaving behind the fatal foursome: Smith, wife Libby Holman, friend Albert Ab Walker, actress Blanche Yerker, and chauffeur William Reynolds. At approximately 2:30, a single gunshot shattered the night, the sound that would define the Reynolds family for generations to come, transforming them from merely wealthy tobacco barons to the stars of America's most sensational society murder case. Walker later testified to finding Smith bleeding on the porch, though his story changed dramatically across 4 contradictory statements, describing positions ranging from slumped against the wall to sprawled on the floor. By 3 o'clock, local doctor Charles H. Koch had arrived, later admitting, "The angle was all wrong for suicide, but Mr. William Reynolds made clear our civic duty," revealing how quickly the family's damage control operation had engaged. The forensic evidence told a different story. The bullet entered Smith's right temple at a downward angle incompatible with self-infliction, unless the 21-year-old heir had developed extremely unusual contortionist abilities. Further suspicious details mounted as investigators noted Libby's blood-soaked silk pajamas had been burned in the mansion's furnace within hours of the shooting, an unusual cleaning impulse for a grieving widow. Chauffeur William Reynolds testified seeing Walker holding Smith's head like a melon before police arrived, though this potentially crucial witness would soon be paid to leave town, eventually dying in a convenient car accident. The Reynolds family launched a damage control operation of industrial efficiency, paying $10,000 to the medical examiner for an altered trajectory report, hiring Pinkerton detectives to trail Holman, and planting stories about Libby's supposed mixed-race heritage. When a grand jury indicted Holman and Walker for first-degree murder in October 1932, the family's intervention reached its apex. William Neal Reynolds, Smith's uncle, orchestrated a $2 million intervention to ensure charges would be dropped. The official explanation came from Uncle William himself. "We'll not have our name dragged through northern tabloids, prioritizing family reputation over justice with the ease that comes from generations of wealth and influence." By December 1932, all charges had been mysteriously dropped due to lack of evidence, coinciding with key witnesses suddenly changing testimony and the discovery that Libby was pregnant with Smith's child. The case spawned competing theories that persist today. A murder-suicide pact gone wrong, a family conspiracy to prevent that showgirl bearing a Reynolds heir, or Freudian self-destruction driven by Smith's possible hidden sexuality and guilt over abandoning aviation dreams. 9 decades later, the truth remains buried beneath layers of money, power, and deliberately destroyed evidence, proving that unlimited wealth can effectively obscure reality when a dynasty decides some truths are too dangerous to their legacy. The mysterious death of 20-year-old tobacco heir Zachary Smith Reynolds on July 6, 1932, ignited a century of speculation while profoundly shaping the Reynolds family's legacy. Libby Holman and Albert Ab Walker were formally indicted for Smith's murder, but the charges were dropped in August 1932 after the Reynolds family intervened to prevent a scandalous public trial. A significant factor in this decision was Libby's pregnancy with Smith's posthumous son, Christopher Topper Reynolds, who would be born in December 1932. William N. Reynolds, Smith's uncle, wrote a pivotal letter to Forsyth County Solicitor Carlisle Higgins, asserting that the evidence didn't conclusively prove murder, a move widely interpreted as leveraging the family's considerable influence to halt prosecution. Questions about the investigation persisted for decades, fueled by troubling inconsistencies including a missing Mauser pistol cartridge casing and a blood-stained handprint on a door that suggested the official suicide narrative might be incomplete. Modern analyses of the available evidence suggest the death might have been accidental during a struggle or an intentional killing obscured by the family's power and determination to avoid public scandal. R.J. Reynolds Jr., Smith's eldest brother and primary heir to the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, assumed leadership of the family business but faced personal turmoil, including 4 marriages and estrangement from his children. His 1951 will left most of his $25 million estate to his 4th wife, Anne Marie Schmidt, disinheriting his sons Richard Joshua Reynolds III and Patrick Reynolds. Despite his personal flaws, R.J. Reynolds Jr. supported the creation of the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation in 1936, donating $7 million, approximately $155 million today, from Smith's inheritance. Mary Reynolds Babcock, Smith's sister, co-founded the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation with her siblings, focusing its considerable resources on education and public health initiatives throughout North Carolina until her death from cancer in 1953. Nancy Susan Reynolds, the youngest Reynolds sibling, advocated for progressive causes, including civil rights and women's suffrage, through the foundation's work, and commissioned the Smith Reynolds Airport Terminal in Winston-Salem as a tribute to her brother's passion for aviation. Christopher Reynolds, born fatherless to Libby Holman, inherited a $750,000 trust fund but died tragically at 17 in a Swiss Alps climbing accident in 1950, never having the opportunity to fully claim his place in the Reynolds legacy. His untimely death exacerbated Libby's already fragile mental health, contributing to the depression that would eventually lead to her suicide in 1971. Following the traumatic events at Reynolds House, Libby Holman worked to rebuild her interrupted career, returning to Broadway in 1934 and starring in films like Sing Sinner Sing, released in 1933. Her 1940s collaborations with blues guitarist Josh White included the anti-lynching anthem Strange Fruit, making her the first white artist to cover this powerful protest song. Libby's later years were marked by civil rights advocacy, including fundraising for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and partnership with Coretta Scott King following Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. After Christopher's death, Libby adopted 2 sons but struggled with persistent depression, her life ending in suicide in 1971, a final tragic chapter in a story that began with another contested death nearly 4 decades earlier. The Reynolds family legacy continues through descendants who have charted diverse paths, some embracing the tobacco fortune, while others have dedicated their lives to countering its influence. Patrick Reynolds, grandson of R.J. Reynolds, made headlines by breaking dramatically from the family business to become one of America's most visible anti-smoking advocates. In 1989, Patrick founded Tobacco-Free Earth, an organization dedicated to motivating youth to stay tobacco-free and empowering smokers to quit, a direct repudiation of the industry that built his family's fortune. His work includes motivational talks to youth and adults about the dangers of smoking, producing educational videos about tobacco for schools and health departments, and advocating for stronger tobacco control legislation. More recently, Patrick expanded his advocacy into politics by launching Congress Majority PAC to support Democratic candidates, further distancing himself from the traditionally conservative Southern business dynasty his grandfather created. Before this turn to activism, Patrick maintained a career as an actor, appearing in television shows, films, and stage productions since 1975, using his family name for publicity and entertainment rather than tobacco. Richard Joshua Reynolds III, another grandson of the tobacco patriarch, chose a spiritual and artistic path before his death in 1994. He founded Full Sky Publishing, a company dedicated to publishing work by young writers, produced the film Siddhartha, based on Hermann Hesse's novel about spiritual enlightenment, and established the Sufi Institute in New Mexico. These divergent paths illustrate how subsequent generations of Reynolds heirs have grappled with their complicated inheritance, some embracing business and others turning toward art, spirituality, or activism to forge identities separate from tobacco. Reynolda House itself, once the scene of Smith Reynolds' mysterious death, has been transformed into an art museum where visitors can stand on the same sleeping porch where he died in 1932. The museum now offers a permanent exhibition titled Smith and Libby, 2 Rings, 7 Months, 1 Bullet, that examines the relationship between Smith Reynolds and Libby Holman and the mysterious circumstances surrounding his death. This transformation from family estate to cultural institution represents the Reynolds family's evolution from private industrial dynasty to public legacy, their personal tragedies and business success now part of American cultural history. The Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, established with funds from Smith's inheritance, continues its philanthropic work focusing on education, public health, and social justice initiatives throughout North Carolina. The foundation stands as perhaps the most positive outcome of the tragic events of 1932, channeling tobacco wealth toward public benefit and ensuring that Smith Reynolds' brief life left a lasting impact beyond the scandal of his death. While the Reynolds tobacco enterprise has been absorbed into larger corporate entities, the family name remains associated both with the industry that built their fortune and the philanthropic institutions their wealth created. The contrasting paths of Reynolds' descendants like Patrick and Richard Joshua III reflect America's complicated relationship with tobacco, a product that generated tremendous wealth while causing immeasurable harm. Imagine, if you will, stepping into a time machine, setting the coordinates for the heart of the Gilded Age, America's era of unprecedented industry and affluence that forged the most iconic old money families. And, amid the titans of the time, beyond the Rockefellers, Carnegies, Astors, and Mellons, there looms a name that might surprise you: Gould. Indeed, Jay Gould, that infamous architect of fortunes whose audacious maneuvers in finance and railroads arguably gave us the phrase robber baron. But Gould's tale doesn't just end with that moniker. At the zenith of his power, he was a force so formidable that he came breathtakingly close to cornering the entire gold market, a feat so fantastical that it threatened to bring President Ulysses S. Grant to his knees. On today's episode, we become your tour guides into the opulent and infamous world of Jay Gould and his descendants. Through their eyes, you will witness the fierce battles for supremacy in business, the lavish lifestyles that only unimaginable wealth could afford, and the intricate strategies of power and influence that turned the wheels of the nation's progress, painting a vivid picture of an era where ambition knew no bounds and the quest for dominance was the ultimate game. Thus, their legacy, marked by extravagant multi-billion-dollar successes and spectacular falls from grace, offers a window into the tumultuous period that gave rise to America's wealthiest dynasties. As we describe the Goulds, the old money family that went from riches to rags and back again. Jay Gould, a titan of American railroads and a wizard of finance, stitched his name into the fabric of the late 19th century with a fortune so vast it's hard to wrap your head around it. Picture $71.2 billion in today's dollars, enough to make Midas blush. Therefore, Gould wasn't just rich. He was a cornerstone of America's transportation revolution, playing the market with the finesse of a seasoned gambler. And his empire wasn't confined to ledgers and stock certificates. Gould's penchant for splendor was nowhere more evident than in his choice of digs, with Lyndhurst Mansion being the jewel in his crown. Perched by the Hudson in Tarrytown, New York, this Gothic revival masterpiece, enveloped in its own 67-acre wonderland, was more than a home. It was a statement. Acquired in 1880, Lyndhurst was a canvas for Gould's grandeur, boasting turrets and designs that broke the mold of conventional architecture. Thus, his tenure at Lyndhurst, though marred by tuberculosis, was a time of opulence and refinement, evidenced by the treasures within Herter Brothers furniture, Tiffany windows, and paintings straight out of the Knoedler Gallery. After Gould's departure in 1892, Lyndhurst's legacy continued through his daughters, Helen and Anna, who infused it with their personal touches, modernizing and memorializing the estate. Now, a national historic landmark, Lyndhurst stands as a preserved slice of history, inviting us into the world of one of America's most intriguing magnates. But Gould's reach extended beyond the realms of real estate and railroads. His dominion over Western Union gave him the keys to the kingdom of information, allowing him to manipulate news flow and silence critics. Indeed, Gould's dance with politics was a delicate one, involving backroom dealings and, reportedly, the greasing of presidential palms. And Jay Gould's belief in the United States' economic future not only shaped his business maneuvers, but also etched a path for his descendants, weaving their way into the tapestry of global power and prestige. The marriages of his family members, notably Anna Gould's ties with European nobility through her marriages to Bonnie de Castellane and then to Haley de Talleyrand-Périgord, Duke of Saigon, mirrored the Gould family's societal elevation and their unbroken strand of influence. Not to be overshadowed, Helen Vivian Gould's union with John Graham Hope Delapour Horsley Beresford, a scion of British nobility, underscored the family's entrenched status among the world's elite, bridging continents and cultures. These days, the torch of the Gould legacy has been carried forward by their business ventures, particularly through Kingdon Gould III. A beacon of the family's legacy, Kingdon's forays into Washington, D.C. real estate, including the legendarily opulent Mayflower Hotel, highlight the Goulds' unyielding influence on the economic stage. However, needless to say, this family isn't exactly the household name that the Rockefellers or Mellons have continued to be. With that in mind, what exactly happened to this once $70 billion behemoth of a family that led them to fade into obscurity? To answer that, we'll have to turn over the proverbial page to the next chapter. The man who would come to be known in history as much for his infamy as his fame was born, Jason Gould, born on the 7th of May 1836 in Roxbury, New York. And regardless of his later controversial exploits, Without a doubt, the life of Jay Gould represents the classic rags to riches American ethos, as his journey began in a setting far removed from the bustling centers of finance and industry in a family of modest farmers in western New York. Now, John Burr Gould, Jay's father, balanced his life between farming and milling, participating actively in community development. And notably, he was the first male child of European descent born in Roxbury, remembered for his contributions to local education. Mary Moore, Jay's mother, brought to the family a heritage of Scottish settlers known for their strong religious convictions and perseverance. For this, Jay inherited from her a blend of religious fervour and a softer side that would occasionally manifest in his later business dealings. Despite their humble circumstances, Jay Gould's early life was supported by his parents' commitment to his education and development. This support enabled him to attend local schools and further his studies at Beechwood and Hobart seminaries, where he was exposed to classical languages. Undoubtedly, this educational background was somewhat exceptional for a farmer's son, suggesting his parents recognized and nurtured his potential beyond their agricultural setting. Growing up in Roxbury, Gould's early years revealed a sharp intellect and a natural inclination towards commerce, setting him apart from his peers. And the political and social upheavals of the time, particularly his father's involvement in the anti-rent movement, challenging the remnants of feudal land practices in New York, likely had a significant influence on Gould, fostering a sense of determination and the importance of securing one's interests. Then, the trajectory of Gould's career took a decisive turn with his initial foray into the business realm, starting in a blacksmith shop. And his business acumen quickly shone through, leading to an offer of partnership, which he later parlayed into a sale to his father. This early venture into commerce provided Gould with invaluable insights into the mechanics of business, laying the groundwork for his later exploits. Yet, perhaps most telling of Gould's early professional endeavors was his mastery of surveying, which he adeptly turned into a lucrative vocation. His surveying work across New York's southern counties, culminating in the publication of a history book at the age of 19, not only highlighted his expertise, but also his knack for leveraging his talents to full advantage. The young entrepreneur's skills in surveying came to the forefront when he taught himself the trade and turned it into a profession. As Gould's entrepreneurial spirit flourished, he ventured into the tanning industry in the 1850s. With the savings he had accumulated, Gould opened a tannery in Pennsylvania, aligning himself with Zadok Pratt, a veteran in the field with the experience of running the world's largest tannery at one time. And though their collaboration was brief, it proved to be a critical learning curve for Gould, enriching his business management acumen. The dissolution of this partnership led Gould to New York City, the pulsating heart of America's financial universe, where he dived into stock market speculation. His subsequent foray into Wall Street was in partnership with Charles Loop, a seasoned leather merchant. This venture, however, met a grim fate in the Panic of 1857, leaving Loop ruined and Gould's reputation tarnished. Yet, undaunted by these early challenges, Gould's resolve only strengthened. Convinced of the fortunes waiting to be made in New York City, he remained unshaken in his pursuit of success, as he would soon find his calling in a burgeoning industry of the time, the railroads. Jay Gould's foray into the railroad sector marked the beginning of what would evolve into a monumental chapter in his pursuit of wealth and influence. Starting in 1859, Gould dipped his toes into the waters of railroad stocks, laying the groundwork for a venture that would eventually crown him a titan of the industry. And his engagement in the railroad realm took on a more pronounced form during the tumultuous years of the American Civil War, a period ripe with economic disarray, yet brimming with opportunities for those shrewd and tenacious enough to seize them. By 1863, Gould had etched his name as a noteworthy figure in the business world through his management of the Rensselaer and Saratoga Railway. His adept handling of this venture paved the way for his acquisition and reformation of the Rutland and Washington Railway, further cementing his stature within the industry. Subsequently, Gould's ascendancy continued unabated, and by 1867 he had secured a director's seat at the Erie Railroad, setting the stage for one of his most audacious and notorious exploits. But Gould's tenure with the Erie Railroad was marked by brazen financial stratagems that would etch his name into the annals of American business law. The Erie Railroad War, a vehement struggle for dominion over the Erie Railroad, cast Gould into the spotlight as a formidable adversary. Alongside James Fisk, Gould engaged in a series of cunning maneuvers to thwart Cornelius Vanderbilt, deploying fraudulent stock issuances and manipulating legal and political avenues to diminish Vanderbilt's influence over the railroad. Indeed, this skirmish not only cemented Gould's repute as a financial sorcerer, but also highlighted his readiness to employ any means necessary to safeguard his ventures. Yet, it was Gould's venture into the gold market that truly exemplified his boldness and strategic finesse. The infamous Black Friday of 1869 saw Gould and Fisk concoct a plan to monopolize the gold market, driving up prices through accumulation and disinformation, all while betting against the likelihood of government intervention. Gould's audacity reached new heights as he sought insider knowledge from President Ulysses S. Grant's circle, aiming to stay one step ahead of federal actions. Despite their initial success, with gold prices skyrocketing, the government's decisive sale of significant gold reserves under Grant's directive caused the market to plummet, leading to widespread financial devastation. Gould, through cautious hedging, managed to sidestep personal catastrophe, but the debacle left an enduring stain on his legacy, showcasing the volatile nature of unbridled financial speculation. Thus, Gould's business endeavors, marked by a blend of brilliance and moral ambiguity, reveal a pattern of ambitious acquisitions and financial gambits. Through the Erie Railroad War, he demonstrated a relentless drive to manipulate systems to his benefit, a precursor to the bold tactics he would later employ. His attempt to corner the gold market underscored his penchant for risk and innovation, setting him apart from his peers. However, these ventures also painted Gould as a figure whose relentless quest for dominance often skirted the boundaries of ethics, leaving a complex legacy that intertwines ingenuity with controversy. Now, Jay Gould's ascendancy to the zenith of financial success culminated in an amassed fortune, estimated at a staggering $77 million, an amount that, in contemporary terms, translates to many billions, as mentioned in the beginning of this video. His financial dominion extended across various pivotal sectors of the American economy, most notably railroads, telegraphy, and even the media, with significant stakes in the Union Pacific Railroad, Western Union Telegraph Company, and ownership of the New York World newspaper. Yet, despite Gould's undeniable prowess in wealth accumulation and his substantial contributions to the American economic landscape, especially in the realms of railroad expansion and modernization, his name became synonymous with the pejorative moniker robber baron. This label, emblematic of the era's most ruthless capitalists, clung to Gould and his peers, who were perceived as exploiting labor, manipulating markets, and engaging in bribery to amass vast fortunes, often at the public's expense. However, no matter what our opinions of his tactics are, it is clear that Jay Gould emerged a very rich man, ready to pass a hefty legacy on to his children. In the next chapter, we'll find out whether they were able to keep the fortune growing, like the Rockefeller and Mellon descendants did, or if they would falter. George J. Gould's entrance into the world on the 6th of February, 1864, in New York City, marked the assumed continuation of a legacy shaped by his father, Jay Gould. However, unlike the meticulously planned successions of today's old money scions, there was little indication that Jay Gould deliberately prepared George to inherit the empire. Yet, we're on solid footing to assume the environment George grew up in naturally inclined him towards the path tread by his father. Inheriting the reins in 1892, George took over a sprawling network that included the Missouri Pacific and Texas and Pacific railroads, among others. But George's tenure was marked by ambitious but ultimately unfulfilled visions, such as the creation of a transcontinental railroad system. This dream, grand in scope, was marred by a lack of concrete financial and operational planning, and his approach to expansion was fraught with strategic missteps, notably an aggressive push for growth without the necessary capital, which overstretched the empire's resources and hampered its competitiveness. Under George's watch, the Gould railroads grappled with outdated infrastructure and inefficiencies, lagging behind rivals that prioritized modernization and operational excellence. And his failure to adapt to the fast-evolving landscape of the American railroad industry, particularly evident in his handling of economic downturns like the Panic of 1907, further destabilized the empire. Therefore, unlike his father, whose knack for market manipulation and strategic acumen was legendary, George's decisions often reflected a lack of the same depth of insight, leaving the empire vulnerable to financial turmoil. Furthermore, George's laissez-faire management style contributed significantly to the decline of the Gould Empire. This approach led to strategic drift and operational neglect, allowing problems like corruption and maintenance issues to flourish unchecked, a stark departure from Jay Gould's tightly controlled empire. The resulting deterioration in service quality and customer trust further diminished the competitiveness of the Gould railroads. In other words, the cumulative effect of these strategic blunders was the loss of control over the family's railroad holdings, and the financial disarray brought on by George's leadership forced the Goulds to cede several key railroads, marking a dramatic fall from prominence in the American railroad industry. However, while George was bungling up the family fortune, the women of the Gould family were using a bit more tactful approach to the old money game through strategic marriages and working their way into the aristocracy. Anna Gould, born into the opulence and controversy surrounding her father, Jay Gould captured the public's imagination not solely through her inheritance, but also via her marriages to European aristocracy. In 1895, she entered into matrimony with Bonny de Castellane, a French nobleman emblematic of old-world title holders who sought to fortify their waning fortunes through alliances with New World wealth. Indeed, this marriage represented a quintessential Gilded Age transaction, merging the financial might of America's new money with the storied pedigrees of European nobility. And the union of Anna and Bonny was marked by opulence and public fascination, with their Parisian residence, the Palais Rose, standing as a testament to their extravagant lifestyle. However, the marriage deteriorated due to Bonny's prodigal spending habits and unfaithfulness, culminating in their divorce in 1906. Anna's subsequent marriage to another aristocrat, Élie de Talleyrand-Périgord, Duke of Sagan, in 1908, marked her second alliance with European nobility, further elevating her social stature despite initial familial reservations given Élie's relation to Bonny and his less illustrious paternity. Unlike her first marriage, Anna's union with Haley proved to be more harmonious and enduring. Next, Marjorie Gould, a niece of Anna, also navigated the marriage market to bolster the Gould family's societal position through her union with Anthony Joseph Drexel III in 1910. This alliance with the Drexel banking dynasty underscored the strategic matrimonial choices that fortified the Goulds' social standing in both American and European circles. And Helen Gould, another distinguished member of the Gould lineage, furthered the family's entrenchment in nobility through her marriage to John Graham Hope de la Poer Horsley Beresford, the 5th Baron Decies, in 1911. To provide a bit more context, these matrimonial strategies were emblematic of a broader phenomenon during the Gilded Age, where marriages between American heiresses and European nobles were orchestrated not just for love, but for the mutual benefits they offered: financial stability for the aristocracy and an entree into the elite social echelon for America's nouveau riche. The Gould family's forays into such unions thus mirrored the ambitions and societal aspirations of America's wealthiest clans, seeking to cement their legacy and prestige through connections that spanned the Atlantic, blending the rugged individualism of American enterprise with the ancient traditions of European aristocracy. In some ways, we could say these marriages also saved the Gould legacy, for from them birthed later generations of influential, if somewhat poorer, descendants in many fields across the world. The modern Gould family, with its roots deeply entrenched in the industrial and financial bedrock of American history, branched into various spheres of influence and achievement, from the cutthroat arenas of business established by Jay Gould to the refined realms of sport and public service navigated by his descendants. For example, Kingdon Gould Sr. and Jay Gould. The second exemplify the evolution of this dynastic tale, embodying the transition from the aggressive pursuit of wealth to the cultivation of genteel interests and public stewardship. Kingdon Gould Sr., born into privilege in 1887 in Manhattan, emerged as a figure who seamlessly blended the financial legacy of his lineage with a passion for the social and sporting life that defined American high society in the early 20th century. A product of the prestigious Columbia University, his education in engineering paved the way for his stewardship of the family's railroad interests and his valorous service during World War I. And beyond his professional endeavors, Kingdon Sr. was renowned for his prowess in polo, a sport that symbolized the leisure and competitive spirit of the elite. Furthermore, his marriage to Annunziata Camilla Maria Lucci broadened the familial and social connections of the Goulds, ensuring the legacy's continuation through their children, among them Kingdon Gould Jr., who we'll cover in a second. And Jay Gould II, Kingdon Sr.'s sibling, charted a path in another historically elite sport. His acclaim was garnered not in the boardrooms of industry, but on the court tennis fields, where his extraordinary skill earned him a championship reign that spanned over 2.5 decades, and even an Olympic gold medal. His triumphs in court tennis, starting from a precocious national title win at 17, attested to a dedication that paralleled the industrious spirit of his grandfather, albeit within the confines of sport rather than finance. Yet, the achievements of Jay Gould II in the sporting domain did not insulate him from personal trials, as his life was prematurely curtailed by illness, a poignant reminder of the vulnerabilities that lie beneath the surface of public success. The continuum of the Gould legacy was furthered by Kingdon Gould Jr., who transitioned from the familial heritage of financial and sporting accomplishment to a career defined by political and diplomatic service. His roles as ambassador to Luxembourg and the Netherlands were not merely diplomatic postings, but represented the Gould family's enduring influence within the tapestry of American public life. Kingdon Jr.'s diplomatic tenure, especially during the tumultuous period of Nixon's resignation, highlighted the adaptability that have characterized the Goulds across generations. The legacy persisted through Kingdon Gould III, who carved out a significant niche within the real estate development sector, particularly in the bustling environs of Washington, D.C. As a key figure in the Gould Property Company, founded by his father, Kingdon III steered the firm to prominence in the D.C. metropolitan landscape. His stewardship was marked by his role in spearheading projects like the Hyatt Regency Crystal City Hotel and the iconic Mayflower Hotel, both of which have left a lasting impact on the city's architectural and commercial development. Kingdon III's entrepreneurial vision was further manifested in the partnership with Boston Properties, culminating in the development of Market Square North. This project, completed in 1997, not only enhanced the Pennsylvania Avenue National Historic Site, but also exemplified his ability to blend historical preservation with modern development. Additionally, his strategic foresight in executing a land swap deal with the District of Columbia paved the way for the construction of the Washington Marriott Marquise. This hotel, serving as a central hub for the Walter E. Washington Convention Center, underscored Kingdon III's influential role in shaping the real estate and hospitality sectors in Washington, D.C., thus continuing the Gould legacy of impactful contributions across generations. Thus, the Gould family legacy, spanning from Jay Gould's notorious rise as a Gilded Age tycoon to his descendants' diverse pursuits in sports, diplomacy, real estate, and even European aristocracy, embodies the complexity of American success. While Jay's ruthless business tactics earned him wealth and infamy, his descendants diversified this legacy through contributions to sportsmanship, public service, and urban development, blending ambition with societal engagement, but also navigating the controversies inherited from their forebears' tumultuous career. While most videos about the Vanderbilt dynasty you'll find online focus on how much money they made, spent, and eventually lost, the real tragedy of America's richest family unfolded in secret. You see, The scandalous rise and fall of the Vanderbilt family is rarely ever told as it truly was, an epic downfall stemming from parenting failures that swung from brutal authoritarianism to neglectful indulgence, of children warped by wealth they never earned, and of a dynasty where money became both god and demon. Thus, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we share a one-of-a-kind analysis of how America's richest dynasty was doomed from its very inception, not by spending habits, but by the mental patterns established by its founder and amplified through each successive generation.
Cornelius Vanderbilt had what he called a mania for money. It's all he cared about. He didn't care about his family so much, he cared about the money. And that mania for money, that pathology, infected every subsequent generation in ways that it's just kind of fascinating to see how it kind of infected them.
Cornelius Vanderbilt's relationship with money bordered on madness. "I have been insane on the subject of money-making all my life," he once confessed, offering a rare glimpse into his self-awareness. This was no exaggeration from a successful businessman. It stood as the raw admission of a man whose identity had fused completely with wealth accumulation. Anderson Cooper, his great-great-great-grandson, assessed him bluntly. "I actually started out thinking maybe he was a psychopath." Cooper eventually concluded that money had become his sole reason for being. The Commodore's fixation transcended any desire for luxury or comfort. "I don't care half so much about making money as I do about making my point and coming out ahead," he declared, revealing that wealth served as his scoreboard in an endless competition. This psychological framework would later spread through the family dynasty like a virus. Born in Staten Island in 1794, Vanderbilt quit school at age 11 to work on his father's ferry. By 16, he had borrowed $100 from his mother to purchase his first boat. The seed of obsession had been planted early, a boy calculating profits while other children played. The human toll of this obsession proved devastating. He committed his wife to a mental asylum when she became an inconvenience. He sent his son, Cornelius Jeremiah, to the same institution, possibly because of his homosexuality. Every relationship bowed before his financial ambitions. As a father, the Commodore ruled with iron-fisted cruelty. He habitually demeaned his son, William Henry, labeling him a blockhead and a blatherskite, a person who speaks nonsense. This verbal assault cut so deep that William Henry suffered a nervous breakdown at age 19. Rather than offering support, the Commodore banished his son to manage a small family farm on Staten Island, effectively discarding the disappointment. His indifference extended to his 9 daughters, treating them as afterthoughts in his dynastic plans. The emotional damage extended beyond his children. Vanderbilt wielded his fortune as a weapon even after death, bequeathing 95% to William Henry, while the remaining 5% went to his other 10 children. Money functioned as his ultimate control mechanism, extending his tyranny beyond the grave. His business tactics matched his personal brutality. He crushed competitors without hesitation, treating business as warfare and accumulation as conquest. Starting with ferries, then steamships, and finally railroads, he consolidated transportation monopolies through manipulation and ruthlessness. Competitors often paid him substantial sums simply to operate elsewhere, monuments to the fear he inspired. His steamship monopolies earned him the title Commodore, a nickname that followed him even as he transitioned to railroad dominance. When challenged, he famously declared, "What do I care about the law? Ain't I got the power?" By his death in 1877, he had amassed approximately $105 million, making the Vanderbilts the wealthiest family on the planet. What the Commodore failed to anticipate was how his pathological relationship with money would transform across generations. The obsession with making money would gradually mutate into an equally destructive obsession with spending it. The ruthless focus that built the fortune would give way to an aimless, undisciplined approach that would ultimately destroy it. And the scars from his authoritarian parenting would ripple through the family line, creating generations of children traumatized by harshness or crippled by permissiveness. The Commodore's money pathology had begun its devastating journey through the Vanderbilt bloodline.
So the major question when it comes to the Vanderbilt Empire after the patriarch's death is, what did Billy Vanderbilt do with the money? And to his credit, Billy ended up doubling the money with time, carefully maintaining the Vanderbilt fortune through the opulence and performance of the Gilded Age.
William Henry Vanderbilt emerged from his father's shadow like a man climbing from darkness into blinding light. The man who would eventually double the staggering Vanderbilt fortune began his journey as the family's great disappointment. The Commodore's constant ridicule crushed him so thoroughly that at 19 his mind fractured, a nervous breakdown that would forever alter his relationship with both wealth and family. After his collapse, William Henry found himself exiled to a muddy patch of Staten Island farmland. Banished from his father's empire, he discovered an unexpected talent buried beneath the weight of paternal disapproval. The failing farm blossomed under his hand. More remarkably, the struggling Staten Island Railroad, a failing enterprise, transformed into a profitable venture through his unexpected business acumen. The Commodore, returning from a European tour in 1853, found his blockhead son had become something unforeseen, competent. This psychological resurrection from broken, dismissed heir to trusted successor came at a profound interior cost. Unlike his father, who worshipped at the altar of wealth, William Henry developed an almost superstitious fear of his own fortune. Massive wealth provided no advantages over moderate wealth, he would mutter like a man haunted by a curse. His fortune brought him nothing but anxiety, the complaint of a man drowning in golden waters. In a moment of startling clarity, William Henry once gazed at his neighbor's modest home and observed, "He isn't worth 100th part as much as I am, but he has more of the real pleasures of life than I have. His house is as comfortable as mine, even if it didn't cost so much. His team is about as good as mine. His opera box is next to mine. His health is better than mine, and he will probably outlive me, and he can trust his friends." The words hung in the air, a billionaire's confession of emptiness. This fundamental ambivalence coexisted strangely with ruthless business tactics. When questioned about discontinuing a popular express train, William Henry infamously declared, "The public be damned. I don't take any stock in this silly nonsense about working for anybody but our own." This psychological resurrection from broken, dismissed heir to trusted successor came at a profound interior cost. Unlike his father, who worshipped at the altar of wealth, William Henry developed an almost superstitious fear of his own fortune. When William Henry inherited his father's fortune in 1877, the scars of childhood emotional abuse shaped his approach to his own children. While the Commodore had been described as a mean man, never kindly or loving, like a dictator with his children, William Henry swung to the opposite extreme. He lavished his children with European travels and cultural experiences, taking his youngest son, George, on art collecting expeditions by the time the boy was 12. A painting titled "Going to the Opera," commissioned by William Henry, spoke volumes, depicting the family gathered in their mansion, older children dressed for the opera, servants hovering in the background. The image captured what he had craved as a child, family warmth wrapped in visible prosperity. Unlike the Commodore, who concentrated 95% of wealth in a single heir, William Henry dispersed his fortune widely. Each child received approximately $10 million, transforming them into what Arthur T. Vanderbilt II would later describe as a bunch of mini emperors, not one showing any interest in making money or even keeping track of it, just spending it. William Henry's frail health cut short his reign at the pinnacle of American prosperity, and he resigned his railroad presidencies in 1883 due to chronic sickness. Just 2 years later, at age 64, he collapsed during a business meeting with Baltimore and Ohio Railroad President Robert Garrett. His death came merely 8 years after inheriting, fatally limiting his time to transmit financial discipline to his children. The psychological pendulum had swung from the Commodore's cruel authoritarian parenting to William Henry's indulgent permissiveness. The father, who suffered from too little nurturing, gave his children too much freedom. The man who endured harsh expectations imposed virtually none on his heirs. This unspoken psychological reaction against his own childhood would shape the dynasty's fate more profoundly than any business decision he ever made.
Mr. Vanderbilt has no fads or hobbies. He is a man of strong domestic tastes and finds his chief enjoyment in the family circle. The Times, 1893.
The Gilded Dynasty needed a golden child, and Cornelius Vanderbilt II fit the role perfectly. Heir to a business empire and bearer of his grandfather's name, he alone would navigate the treacherous waters between wealth's creation and its inevitable dissolution. Born in 1843 on Staten Island, he emerged as the favorite grandson of the fearsome Commodore and eldest son of William Henry. Unlike his father, who suffered beneath the Commodore's caustic criticism, young Cornelius received validation from the beginning. His work ethic, while clerking at the Shoe and Leather Bank in New York City, endeared him to his grandfather, the Commodore, who was a strong believer in personal industry. This early approval created a fundamentally different psychological foundation than his father's nervous breakdown and exile. While William Henry had scraped and clawed for his father's respect, Cornelius II inherited it. This psychological security manifested in a dual approach to wealth, maintaining his father's business acumen while developing an unprecedented philanthropy. He built two of America's most spectacular mansions, the Vanderbilt Chateau and the Breakers, but rarely had time to enjoy them. Instead, he made a habit of donating much of his income to various charitable causes. Yet beneath this veneer of success and generosity lurked a familiar Vanderbilt trait: authoritarian control. Cornelius II proved to be a hard-nosed man in his relations with his older children. When his son Cornelius III announced in 1896 that he wished to marry Grace Graham Wilson, Cornelius II refused permission. No reason was given. The patriarch's word was enough. When the young couple married anyway, Cornelius II responded with the ultimate weapon in a wealthy man's arsenal: disinheritance. The hard-nosed approach to his elder children contrasted sharply with his treatment of his youngest son, Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt, born in 1880. By Reginald's birth, Cornelius II had reached 37 years of age, established, secure, and increasingly indulgent. The family now occupied the pinnacle of New York society. Reginald grew up knowing only extreme privilege, never witnessing the striving that built the colossal fortune. Then came the turning point. In 1896, when Reginald was 16, Cornelius II suffered a stroke. This health crisis compelled him to reduce his active business involvement precisely during his youngest son's most formative years. The timing proved catastrophic for the family fortune. With his father's influence waning, Reginald's character development took a dangerous turn. The final blow fell on the 12th of September, 1899. Father Cornelius II died of a cerebral hemorrhage shortly after 6 a.m. at his home on West 57th Street in Manhattan. Reginald was only 19 years old, a critical juncture when financial discipline and business acumen should have been firmly instilled. Instead, the heir now had unfettered access to millions without the tempering guidance his forebears had received. Cornelius II left an estate valued at nearly $73 million, with $20 million in real estate alone. His older children, those shaped by his stricter parenting, largely maintained the family's business interests and philanthropic endeavors. But Reginald, the child of his father's declining years, followed a radically different path. While his brother Cornelius III wanted to make a contribution to society, Reginald abandoned Yale after 2 years to pursue horses and high living. The psychological journey across 3 generations had reached its pivotal moment. The founder's monomania for money-making had morphed into William Henry's ambivalent wealth expansion, then into Cornelius II's wealth management and philanthropy. Now in Reginald's hands, the fortune faced its greatest test. A young man with all the resources of a Vanderbilt, but none of the psychological foundation that had built the family empire. The pudgy figure in the roadster presented a startling spectacle to rural onlookers. Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt, heir to one of history's greatest fortunes, raced down country lanes with a bull terrier perched beside him, burning fuel as recklessly as he burned money. Born in 1880, as the youngest son of Cornelius II, Reginald emerged from a perfect storm of psychological vulnerability. His great-grandfather had died before his birth, his grandfather, William Henry, when he was merely 5. His father suffered a stroke when Reginald was 16, then died when the boy was 19. 3 generations of financial discipline had evaporated, leaving only wealth without wisdom. The consequences manifested immediately and spectacularly. On his 21st birthday, Having gained access to an inheritance of $15.5 million, approximately $460 million in today's currency, Reginald celebrated by losing $70,000 at the gambling table in a single night. This staggering sum, equivalent to over $2 million today, disappeared without a moment's hesitation or remorse. Yale University suffered his indifferent attendance for 2 years before he abandoned education entirely. His profligacy knew no bounds. He commissioned solid gold nameplates for each of his 60 thoroughbred horses. He purchased hundreds of automobiles on pure whim. During one legendary evening at the roulette tables, he hemorrhaged $120,000, nearly $4 million in contemporary valuation. Over his lifetime, Reginald inherited $25 million, approximating $742 million today, all of which vanished through drink and gambling. By age 42, doctors delivered a stark prognosis: stop drinking or die. Reginald responded by marrying 17-year-old socialite Gloria Morgan. 3 years later, in 1925, cirrhosis of the liver claimed him at age 45. He left behind an 18-month-old daughter, also named Gloria, who would later achieve fame as a fashion designer. But the most shocking revelation came after his death. The heir to the greatest fortune in American history had died broke. He'd blasted through his entire fortune and incurred huge debts besides. Only a $5 million trust fund remained, to be divided between his young widow and infant daughter. This trust would soon fuel the infamous custody battle that newspapers dubbed the trial of the century. Reginald's spectacular financial collapse represented the culmination of a multi-generational psychological progression. Unlike the Commodore, who created wealth through savage determination, unlike William Henry, who maintained it through anxious discipline, unlike Cornelius II, who balanced it with philanthropy, Reginald knew only consumption. His development lacked critical psychological inputs. The stern guidance of an authoritarian father had vanished during his formative years. Where earlier generations received validation only after demonstrating competence, Reginald enjoyed approval without corresponding expectations. Without an authority figure imposing boundaries, in psychological terms, Reginald exhibited classic third-generation syndrome. Having neither created wealth himself nor witnessed its creation, he lacked both skills and motivation for preservation. The psychological trajectory of the Vanderbilt fortune had reached its inevitable conclusion. The obsessive accumulation had transformed fully into pathological spending, and the infant Gloria, born into collapsing splendor, would carry this psychological inheritance into the next generation.
The dynasty ended with heiress-turned-fashion designer Gloria Vanderbilt. After her death in 2019, her son Anderson Cooper sorted through troves of letters, documents, and journals, giving voice to the Vanderbilt ancestors he never knew.
The poor little rich girl never stood a chance. Gloria Vanderbilt entered the world on February 20th, 1924. Born into the wreckage of a once great fortune, her identity already a national obsession. At 18 months old, her father Reginald died from cirrhosis, leaving her half of a $5 million trust fund, the meager remnants of the Vanderbilt fortune. The real inheritance proved psychological rather than financial. At age 10, Gloria became the unwilling center of a custody battle dubbed the trial of the century by ravenous Depression-era newspapers. Her mother, Gloria Morgan Vanderbilt, and paternal aunt, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, battled for control of both the child and her trust fund. The courtroom became a theater of class warfare as Americans, mired in economic depression, devoured salacious details about the dysfunctional ultra-wealthy. After her aunt won custody, Gloria would later tell her son Anderson, "I had no relationship with her at all and just worshipped her from afar. I felt like an imposter." Gloria's relationship with wealth mirrored her fragmentary childhood, inconsistent, unstable, ultimately unreliable. Coming into her inheritance at 21, she embarked on a series of marriages and careers in art, acting, and eventually fashion design. In the 1970s, she launched her designer jeans line, her swan logo adorning millions of back pockets across America. At the height of success, she reportedly earned $10 million in royalties in 1980 alone. Yet the Commodore's pathology of money had morphed again. Gloria oscillated between making and losing fortunes. The 1980s brought catastrophe when Gloria discovered her lawyer had defrauded her of millions and failed to pay her taxes. The IRS placed a lien against her properties for $2.5 million. Forced to sell her homes, she faced financial ruin once more. Her son Anderson, born in 1967, watched this cycle with increasing wariness. By age 13, Cooper had begun working as a child model to earn his own money. "Work for me has been the thing which has gotten me through everything," he would later confess. Rather than resenting the absence of Vanderbilt wealth, Cooper embraced independence. "I don't believe in inheriting money," he declared, calling it an initiative sucker and a curse. He deliberately distanced himself from the Vanderbilt legacy, identifying as a Cooper, the surname of his father, who grew up poor in Mississippi. The final irony arrived in 2019 when Gloria died at 95. She left her son approximately $1.5 million, confirming that the Vanderbilt fortune had fully completed its evaporation. Yet something unexpected happened as Gloria's life concluded. Cooper, who had spent decades avoiding the Vanderbilt legacy, found himself drawn to understand it. In 2021, he co-authored Vanderbilt, The Rise and Fall of an American Dynasty with historian Catherine Howe. His purpose was not to glorify family wealth, but to examine how money had warped each generation that touched it. The great fortune had come full circle. What began as a pathological fixation on accumulating wealth had produced 5 generations later a man who found psychological freedom by rejecting wealth's grip entirely. Cooper's financial independence achieved what the Vanderbilt fortune never could: genuine self-worth. The final descendant had escaped the gravity of his great-great-great-grandfather's obsession, and in this liberation lay the most valuable inheritance of all. Imagine you are a multi-billionaire tycoon in the twilight of your life, standing before the vast empire you've built from the ground up. As you decide where to leave your fortune, you look into the eyes of your heirs, trying to discern who among them you trust enough to handle your life's work. Indeed, it would be a moment of profound introspection and decision-making, echoing the choices faced by industrial robber barons of the past. And one such magnate, Henry Clay Frick, confronted this very dilemma. His legacy, however, took a turn that many might not anticipate. In the cutthroat world of the steel industry, Frick's business practices earned him infamy. Yet, perhaps as a counterbalance to his ruthless pursuits, he also became known for his lavish spending on art and cultural artifacts. Turning their backs on the race to accumulate more wealth, the Frick children found their callings as scientists, professors, and artists, quietly choosing to let the mighty $3 billion Frick family fortune dwindle away, setting the name apart from old money families whose wealth seems to grow by the minute, like the Rockefellers and Mellons. In today's episode, we dive into the lessons learned from the Frick family fortune, the complexities of inheritance, and the nuances of old money as we describe the Frick family, when a $3 billion inheritance is given away. Henry Clay Frick, that titan of American industry and a maestro in the art of making bank, didn't just climb the ladder of the Industrial Revolution. He practically built a new one, planting himself firmly as the world's second richest man at his peak. And his wealth, painstakingly forged in the fires of the coke and steel industries, didn't just surpass the fortunes of mere mortals. It even outshone that of his mentor and partner in industrial alchemy, Andrew Carnegie. But Frick was no one-trick pony. His shrewd business sense, tireless dedication, and knack for spotting golden opportunities in coke and steel turned his ventures into the Midas touch of the era. H.C. Frick & Company wasn't just another player in the game, it was the game, fueling the furnaces of steel magnates like Carnegie himself. By joining forces with Carnegie in 1882, Frick entered the steel industry's major league and became its MVP, riding the wave of America's steel-fueled ascendancy. But let's not box Frick into the all-work and no-play category. The man had a flair for the finer things in life, a veritable connoisseur of the arts with a taste as refined as the finest aged wine. His New York City mansion was a temple to luxury, and a Beaux-Arts masterpiece that shouted opulence from every limestone block. Built between 1912 and 1914, this Fifth Avenue fortress was more than a dwelling. It was a vessel for Frick's monumental art collection, destined to become the Frick Collection Museum. And the mansion's interiors? Think of them as the velvet glove on the iron fist of industry, with 16 rooms that were less rooms and more sanctuaries for the soul. This was a home built not just to live in, but to exhibit a collection that would make any art lover weep with joy. The so-called living hall alone, virtually unchanged for over 76 years, is an icon of Frick's enduring vision of grandeur and grace. And what of the art? Frick didn't just collect paintings. He collected masterpieces from Rembrandt's enigmatic The Polish Rider to Goya's dynamic The Forge. His collection was a roll call of art history's VIPs: Bellini, Vermeer, Gainsborough, El Greco. Each piece a badge of honor, each brushstroke a narrative of Frick's journey from steel magnate to patron saint of the arts. Today, the Frick collection stands not just as a museum, but as a cathedral to creativity, housing over 1,500 pieces that span centuries of European art. Thus, when Frick took his final bow in 1919, he didn't just leave behind a pile of cash. He left a treasure trove so immense it's hard to wrap your head around it. Imagine a fortune so vast that today it would be worth billions, a sum so eye-watering it underscores the monumental empire he built, brick by coke-fired brick. Clocking in at an estimated $145 million at his earthly departure, think a cool $2.9 billion today, Frick's fortune was the stuff of legends. Therefore, from humble origins to towering over the American Industrial Revolution, Frick's story wasn't just about making money, it was about making history. However, making the money for yourself is one thing, teaching your children, and then their children, requires an entirely different skill set. In order to learn exactly what happened to the mighty Frick fortune, let's roll back the gold-encrusted timepiece and start our journey in the rolling hills of rural Pennsylvania. Yet, as the story unfolded, it led to a pivotal moment that would shock both admirers and critics alike. In the early settlements of Pennsylvania, where opportunity beckoned the bold, the forebears of Henry Clay Frick made their mark. Originating from Swiss and German stock, these pioneers embodied the spirit of those seeking a fresh start in the New World. And their endeavors, primarily rooted in agriculture, contributed to the development of western Pennsylvania, setting a stage far removed from the future industrial exploits of their descendant. Indeed, John W. Frick, Henry's father, was no stranger to this agricultural life, but harbored ambitions that stretched beyond the confines of farm work. Born into a modest farming environment, John was a man who saw value in education and the promise of innovation, despite the family's financial limitations. And Elizabeth Overholt Frick, Henry's mother, brought to the family a legacy of industry from the Overholts, a family known in their locality for their work ethic and for making a mark in the distilling business. Elizabeth's influence imbued the family with a resilience and a strong sense of community, foundational values in the small town of West Overton, Pennsylvania, where Henry was born. Thus, the upbringing of Henry Clay Frick reflected these principles of hard work and community service. Born on the 19th of December 1849, as the eldest of 6 children, Henry's early life was framed by the simplicity of rural America, an existence marked by the labor of farming and the tight-knit community ties. And his education, starting in the local schools, revealed an early inclination towards business and a particular talent for numbers. Despite showing promise and a hunger for knowledge, financial pressures led to a pragmatic shift in Frick's path. Leaving Otterbein College to return home at 16, he began working as a clerk in a Pittsburgh mercantile firm, a decision dictated more by necessity than choice. This period of work outside the academic sphere offered Frick practical insights into the business world, an unplanned but invaluable continuation of his education. And these clerkship years were more than a stepping stone. They were a transformative period that allowed Frick to internalize the mechanics of business and the intricacies of the market. Therefore, this era in his life was instrumental in shaping his approach to business, fostering a meticulousness in financial matters and a strategic vision that could pinpoint and exploit nascent opportunities with precision. By 19, he had launched into his first venture into entrepreneurship, investing in a coke production operation. This bold move signaled the onset of an expansive business empire, and Frick's unyielding determination and keen business insight would soon propel him from the modest beginnings of rural Pennsylvania to towering heights in the industrial landscape. Henry Clay Frick's entry into the coke and steel sectors was a pivotal move that not only surged his wealth, but also solidified his position in American industrial history. And his strategic ventures in these industries were characterized by shrewd decisions and alliances, propelling him to a leading role in the Industrial Revolution. You see, the inception of Frick's journey into the coke business in the 1870s showcased his ability to identify and capitalize on emerging market trends. Coke, a critical fuel derived from coal for steel production, was growing in demand as the steel industry began to boom. Consequently, starting with a modest investment in a small coke operation, Frick's keen market insight and entrepreneurial spirit led to the rapid expansion of his enterprise, H.C. Frick and Company. And his efforts soon positioned him as the country's leading coke producer. Now, a defining moment in Frick's career was his partnership with Andrew Carnegie during the 1880s. Carnegie, a major figure in the steel industry, recognized the importance of having a stable coke supply for his mills. This partnership between Carnegie's steel manufacturing capabilities and Frick's coke production expertise was a powerful combination, enabling them to dominate the steel and coke markets. And Frick's role evolved significantly when he became chairman of Carnegie Brothers and Company in 1889, further tightening the integration between coke production and steel manufacturing. Now, this collaboration with Carnegie was crucial for Frick's financial success. As the steel industry flourished, driven by the expansion of railroads and the urbanization of America, Frick's wealth skyrocketed. His dominance over the coke supply chain provided him with a strategic edge and a lucrative slice of the industry's profits. Frick's influence extended further, with his contribution to the creation of the United States Steel Corporation in 1901. This amalgamation of steel and iron firms, including Carnegie Steel, into the world's first billion-dollar corporation, signaled a new chapter in industrial history. By the dawn of the 20th century, Frick had become one of the nation's richest individuals. His ventures into coke and steel, coupled with his alliance with Carnegie, yielded substantial returns, enabling him to diversify into real estate and finance. However, Frick's legacy is not without its controversies. His vehement stance against labor unions and his pivotal role in the Homestead Strike of 1892 underscore a darker aspect of his legacy. This confrontation at the Homestead Steel Works, which Frick managed on behalf of Andrew Carnegie, became one of the most notorious labor disputes in American history. And the decision to bring in private security agents from the Pinkerton Detective Agency to break the strike led to a violent clash, resulting in numerous fatalities and a wave of national condemnation. The incident not only spotlighted the harsh realities of labor conditions during the era, but also the extreme measures industrial magnates would employ to quash unionization efforts and maintain control over their workforce. Despite the shadow cast by such events, the impact of Henry Clay Frick on the industrial landscape of America is undeniable. His strategies, though often criticized for their ruthlessness, played a pivotal role in establishing a vast industrial empire. His legacy, though complex and controversial, underscores the multifaceted nature of industrial expansion and its far-reaching effects on American society and economy. However, his impact on his own children and descendants would be even more direct, which is what we'll investigate in the next chapter. Henry Clay Frick, indeed, left a legacy that extends far beyond his business achievements. Upon his passing in 1919, the division of his substantial estate revealed a clear preference for his daughter, Helen Clay Frick, who inherited the majority of his wealth. This decision highlighted her distinctive role within the Frick family and paved the way for her future endeavors in philanthropy and the arts, in sharp contrast to her siblings, who received significantly less. Now, many say Helen's inheritance was a deliberate recognition of her shared interests with her father, particularly in the realm of art. Entrusted with a considerable portion of his fortune, including his esteemed art collection and his New York residence, later transformed into the renowned Frick Collection Museum. This bequest appears to be a clear indication of Frick's trust in Helen's ability to further his cultural and philanthropic aspirations. However, the financial discrepancy in the inheritance was notable. Helen's share amounted to approximately $38 million, equivalent to over $400 million in today's currency, positioning her among the wealthiest women in America during that period. On the other hand, Frick's son, Childs Frick, received a lesser portion of the estate. Though still a considerable amount, it paled in comparison to what Helen received. Yet, nevertheless, Childs established his own legacy as a noted vertebrate paleontologist, contributing extensively to the American Museum of Natural History. Yet the repercussions of Frick's decision have had a lasting effect on his lineage. Helen's inheritance not only allowed her to enhance the Frick legacy through her philanthropic and cultural contributions, but also set a precedent for the subsequent generations. And her efforts laid the groundwork for her nephew, Henry Clay Frick II, and other descendants to pursue diverse interests and careers. Notably, Henry Clay Frick II became a distinguished physician and professor instead of a ruthless businessman like his grandfather, serving as chairman of the Department of Medicine at New York Hospital, Cornell Medical Center. Thus, his career, though distinct from the industrial and artistic spheres of his grandfather and aunt, was facilitated by the financial stability afforded by the Frick fortune, showcasing the varied paths Frick's descendants have taken, each shaped by the inheritance and the legacy left behind. However, it is certainly clear that the multi-billionaire lifestyle that Frick himself lived would not be the path of his later descendants, due in part to his personal dispensations of wealth. In order to better understand how that played and compare it to other old money families who kept and even increased their wealth, such as the Rockefellers and Mellons, let's jump to the next chapter. Now, Henry Clay Frick's approach to amassing and allocating his fortune was characterized by a pronounced emphasis on culture and philanthropy. His lavish expenditures, epitomized by his opulent New York City residence, now the esteemed Frick Collection Museum, and his vast art collection, underscored his profound appreciation for cultural and historical patrimony. And while these investments endowed his legacy with a rich cultural dimension, they did not enhance the financial inheritance bequeathed to his descendants in a direct manner. In a marked contrast, contemporaries such as the Rockefellers and Mellons opted for a diversified investment strategy, channeling their fortunes into ventures that assured enduring generational wealth. The Rockefellers, for example, significantly engaged in philanthropic endeavors through the establishment of perpetual entities like the Rockefeller Foundation. This strategy not only advanced public health initiatives, but also secured and augmented the family's wealth. Likewise, the Mellons' savvy investments across finance and industry sectors guaranteed a wealth expansion that benefited successive generations. The execution of Frick's estate further highlights the contrast in financial legacy management between his family and those of the Rockefellers or Mellons. Frick allocated a substantial portion of his estate to philanthropic causes, with the majority of his residual wealth inherited by his daughter, Helen Clay Frick. Though laudable, this philanthropic gesture did not facilitate wealth growth over time. Helen, inheriting a considerable fortune, prioritized arts and charity over investment strategies that could have furthered the family's financial base. And Frick's choice to bequeath the bulk of his estate to a singular heir, rather than distributing it among multiple descendants, concentrated the wealth, but simultaneously curtailed its growth potential. Conversely, the Rockefellers and Mellons established trusts and foundations, mechanisms that not only safeguarded their wealth, but enabled its financial proliferation across generations. Therefore, today, Henry Clay Frick's descendants, though comfortably affluent, do not figure among the echelons of modern billionaires. This status is the result of a series of factors deeply embedded in the family's ethos and historical decisions. And the Frick family's inclination towards privacy, coupled with an enduring commitment to philanthropy, has significantly influenced their financial standing and societal perception. Additionally, the Fricks have steered clear of venturing into large-scale business enterprises or adopting investment strategies aimed at significantly multiplying their wealth in today's economic climate. While they have managed their assets with competence, their approach has not been marked by the aggressive pursuit of capital growth, a strategy often employed by contemporary wealthy individuals and families to amass substantial fortunes.